All right. Good afternoon. Happy Monday, everybody. My name is Jason Flame, and welcome to the Master Motivation Podcast. Today is December 12th, 2022. And if you're a martial artist, you do not need an introduction for this man, but I'm going to read his bio anyway.
No,
Roland
no,
Osborne's
stop.
Roland Osborne's life mission is to reach, teach, and inspire the world through the martial arts. Roland runs multiple schools, organizations, and hosted a TV show for Discovery Channel. He currently builds instructor teams and designs curriculum experiences for thousands of martial arts schools through hyper martial arts. His impact on the industry is massive, teaching at over 750 schools, 10,000 instructors, and over 150,000 students during his 30 years as an instructor and business leader.
Keep
This
going,
is
keep going, keep
Roland
going. Come on,
Osborne.
go. More.
More. Thanks for being on the show, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You were one of the very first people, just so you know, you were one of the very first people that I wanted to get on this show. It's
Oh,
been
thank
over
you.
2 years in the making, so I'm excited to have you here and just have a good chat and let you tell your story to
I
everybody that's
appreciate that.
watching.
I appreciate that. Thank you for having me on, and hopefully everybody listening, hopefully you can get something out of it. It's great to have something like this going. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. We've had some really great martial artists on here tell their story, and whether it's inspiration, motivation, or some business tips, whatever we can put out there, and this is interactive, guys. So if you're watching this live, you have a chance to ask Mr. Osborne any questions you want to ask, talk about anything you want to talk about. So please feel free to go ahead and put some comments in there, and we'll get going. So, Roland, can you just kind of tell us, a little bit about your background in martial arts, coming up over 30 years in the martial arts industry, created Hyper. Let's start from the beginning, wherever you want to start.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, I joined martial arts. It's a cool story. I'm a Karate Kid baby, which means, the martial arts shifted dynamically when Karate Kid came out, and it's cool that it's like remake is now coming back out.
Mm.
But my family and I, we went to the drive-in. If anybody watching even knows what a drive-in is, we went to the drive-in in Van Nuys in San Fernando Valley in California, actually close to Encino is where I lived, where Karate Kid is actually from. And we went to the drive-in, and my younger brother signed up for martial arts, and he's like, I want to do it. And I wasn't so sold on it, but my brother gave me a gift card for Christmas. Like in my stocking, I got a little gift card for a couple free private lessons. And it was the second lesson that got me. When I did the back kick, I saw the power of it, and then that changed the perception for me, because the blocks and stuff and the punches and everything, like, okay, that's normal. But when I felt the power of that back kick, and I was like, I could actually protect myself, and it's from behind, and like, somebody sneaking up and whatever. That changed it for me, and then I was like, I kind of like this, and so I got into it, and that was my first start in martial arts. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, so you grew up in the San Fernando Valley. You grew up in
Yes.
Encino.
Yeah.
Pretty,
In
pretty.
Encino. Literally, Michigan. I was born in Michigan. My parents were at Michigan State University, and they were like just waiting for me to be born, just old enough to say like kisses to the family and let's get out of here. And then like
Mhm.
they drove to California for my dad used to build race cars, and they wanted that whole Beach Boys California thing, and we moved to California and Encino.
Well, that's pretty neat. I never knew that about
Yeah,
your dad. So your
yeah,
dad built race cars. I mean, was that like
yeah.
his lifelong career? Was that what he did all through the time that you were growing up, or was that just kind of a pastime?
No. So I had a choice at 15. You would understand this. At 15, my dad was like, "Are you going to work for us, or are you going to go teach classes at the martial arts school?" And so at that time, I actually had started racing. I was racing full blown like race cars. We had a '68 Dodge Charger and a '72 Dodge Dart that were both like 440, 10-second cars, right? 10-second quarter-mile cars. And I was racing both of them. My dad was like, "What do you want to do this summer?" And I was like, I want to go teach martial arts. I don't want to work for my dad. You know what I mean? Like some people go through that, and it's like, do you want it? Your dad's telling you what to do all the time. And I was like, it was a very significant, like changing moment in my life where it was like, you're going to go race cars and you're going to go take over my family business, or you're going to go do martial arts. And I chose martial arts.
Yeah. Well, you said that I might be able to relate to
Yeah,
this, and I can 100% relate to this because my father was in construction from the time I was born,
yeah,
and still still does it somehow.
yeah,
And I was kind of faced with the same thing
yeah,
because I worked summers and all my off times with my dad on the job sites, and I have two brothers. One brother ended up going into that same
yeah.
industry, went into construction, and then my youngest brother, like me, we went into martial arts.
Sure.
So it was definitely for me. It was, I don't know, like construction's hard work. Like
Yeah.
I I like the hard work. I
Hard
like being
work.
physical,
Yeah.
but and karate's hard work too. I mean, running a martial arts school, no
Yeah.
joke, right? It's
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
it's difficult, but in a different way. And you know what?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. Like I remember working with my dad. Is that was the time that I spent with my dad. We went camping, went riding quads, motorcycles, and stuff like that. But like working was time with dad. That was the thing. So
Yeah.
anyway, well, so that's something new that I never really knew about you. Was
Yeah.
growing up
Yeah.
around race cars. And are you still kind of a fan? And like, do you go down and watch any races at the track or?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I grew up around it. I mean, I'm talking, man, every summer we were at car shows,
Mhm.
15 years building cars. I mean, I have the scrapes on my knuckles are not from breaking boards. They're from like wrenching cars. Like I have that. And I built an amazing car as a kid. And I look back, I do miss having like I want a nice car. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But I don't miss like doing the work on it at all. You know what I mean? I don't
Yeah.
regret it at all. I actually sold my 68 Dodge Charger to buy my first martial arts school.
Wow.
So I built the car. I bought it at 11. I worked all summer. It was like $875 in the what was that auto trader, like in the thing we were like scraping through and we saw a charger and my dad was like, hey, you want this? I was like, that would be awesome. Worked all summer, made the $875, bought the car, and we worked on it, and I
Mm.
drove it through high school and stuff. So raced it in high school. It was awesome. I would go from high school. I had two things in high school. I'd go in high school. I would drive down to Pomona because it's pretty close by,
Mhm.
and I would drive and I would jack up my car, put the slicks on, race it, put the regular street tires back on, and go back, drive back home. And it was like that's not like a normal thing for cars. You know what I mean? It's like driving an 11-second car to school every day is not normal. But
Yeah,
that
that's
was my day. And I sold it, and I remembered I sold it, and I was like, I'm changing my life. I'm gonna buy my first martial arts school, and I'm using this money to do it. You know what I mean? So
mhm.
yeah, I it's not that I miss it, but I do miss some aspects of it. I do miss the smell of the fuel and the cars and tires and stuff. Yeah,
It's just something that you never really forget because I get that same
yeah,
thing about riding quads and stuff.
yeah,
Like as soon as someone lights up a two stroke and
yeah,
it just revving it and you're like, oh, that fuel smells good, right?
yeah,
Like you
yeah,
just
yeah,
remember
yeah,
that
yeah,
feel.
yeah.
Well, hey guys, this is Jason Flame and I'm here with Roland Osborne and we're just kind of
Hey
chit
guys,
chatting about race cars, being around,
yeah,
growing
race
up
cars,
around race cars,
not
and
martial arts.
and not martial arts. But that's okay. We'll get back to martial arts.
We will,
By the
yeah,
way, again, if you guys are watching, please drop us some comments or questions. Feel free to ask Roland anything you want to ask right now. But let's get back to martial arts. So you started martial arts in the Karate Kid era. That
yep,
for a lot of us at our age, that was
yeah,
the time that made it real big. And then of course now Cobra Kai is back out, and
that's
that's
cool.
like
Yeah,
a resurgence, which is super cool. But you started in the Red Dragon organization. Is that correct?
yes, yes.
So
Started
so
Red Dragon.
so talk about your instructors and the schools that you trained at and earning your black belt and competition days.
Yeah. So I mean, I grew up in Red Dragon. We have at that point I think there was like 30 something schools. So we had our own competitions and such, and compete nationals, which is like one of the largest competitions on the West Coast, NASCA tournament. And it's a funny story because so think about this: it's in February, so I get this gift card at Christmas. So I go and take the lessons in January, and my instructor was like, he's like, hey, why don't you just go to this competition in February? Right? You're a couple weeks in, you could do it. Wanted to sell me some sparring gear, gives me one private lesson on how to point spar, and sends me to the largest competition in one of the largest in the country. Funny story. I got disqualified. I was fighting, and all of a sudden I saw the kid and I just punched him in the head. Like, and there was no head contact in the underbelt divisions.
Hmm.
So I got disqualified, and yeah, it's a fun story. That was my first start for competition. But from there, I was training. I think It was Jason Frank, a close mentor to me, and obviously he just passed away. Um, he was the first person that was like, "I think you can be really good," and it's amazing when somebody believes in you, how
Hmm.
that changes your perception on yourself, right? When you talk about motivation, somebody believing in you is the highest level of motivation. And he was like, I think you could be really good. And I was like, I didn't understand what that meant. And he's like, I'm going to teach you privately, and start giving me private lessons and start teaching me. I think it was just that point of just somebody saying like they believed in me and I could be better than I was. And
Hmm.
yeah, he trained me, and I did competitions. I fell in love with competition when I started winning, of course, you know. And then yeah, just wanted to keep doing that. He also was the first person that said to me, he said, you know what, you I would love for you to teach classes with me. So I think about it in today's times, right? How many times do you plant that seed in somebody's life? You know, how many
Hmm.
times you can do that? And I look at a kid now on the floor and I'm like, you could be an instructor one day. Last week we did Parents Night Out. We sat down. We have this really cool sheet where the kids sit down and learn about each other, right? We call it the like team building challenge. It's 10 questions that each kid asks each kid. They go back and forth. And I'm watching and I'm listening to them, and they get to the end. The last question is, what is your dream job? What if you could do anything in the world, what would it be? So they were talking like YouTuber, gamer, and it was like, it's interesting for me, right? Interesting probably for you.
Hmm.
What's a YouTuber? What's a gamer? Like, where do they get this? And I looked at him. I was like, you know what? I was like, I love what I do, because I get to hang out with you guys. And like both of them turned their head. They're like, oh, we could be martial arts instructors and hang out with Mr. Osborne. And it's interesting to me. They changed the answers from YouTuber to, and I wasn't trying to do that. You know, we could all selfishly do that.
Hmm.
I see these questions, and you can manipulate a kid because you have that power.
Right.
But I was like, I didn't do it in that reason. I was like, hey, I was like, I love hanging out with you guys, and this is the dream job for me. And they both changed their answers to like, I want to be an instructor like Mr. Osborne. So when I go back, rewind all the way when I was like a blue belt, and he said to me, he's like, hey, you could teach classes with me. He's like, I'm gonna be the head instructor here at the school. Like, why don't you come teach classes with me? And I was like, that's cool. Never thought of it before, and here I
Hmm.
am now. You know what I mean?
Right.
Teaching all over the world, which is awesome. So
And it all started with that one person that believed in you.
it is what it is. It's what
Right.
it
I
is.
mean, isn't
Yeah,
that crazy?
yeah. If you study motivation, I mean, obviously you've interviewed a lot of people, so you got some really good information and really good. I think everybody should. You should make a book out of everything that you've gotten from everybody. But during COVID, I actually studied and listened to over 300 books on human performance and motivation. And the number one thing, Harvard says it. The number one thing is that somebody believes in you is the highest level of motivation. And you could go back to, if you think about it, you could say like, hey, I wanted to do something, right? But then you're not quite sure, and you ask somebody, hey, should I
Hmm.
do this? And they're like, you could do it. I believe in you.
Hmm.
Your wife probably is your number one motivator, or your best friend, whoever you sit and have coffee with, that number one guy. And he's like, dude, why
Hmm.
wouldn't you do that? Go do it. And
Yep.
it's like you go do it because they believe in you. So it starts inside. Intrinsic motivation is a high level, but you also need somebody to put you over that edge and say, like, you can do it.
No, I agree with that 100%, and you nailed it. I mean, my wife is always the
Yeah,
number one person in my ear saying, "You can do it. I believe in you." And there's those times where I doubt myself, and I'm like,
100%.
I don't know. And she,
You
you
can't be
got
that
this.
tough, right? You can't be that tough. Like, you're an amazing guy, dude. You're teaching so many people, but you're human, right?
Right.
I'm human. We're human. We all need that little motivation. We all need that little push. We need our wife, your significant other. You need somebody in your ear just saying, like, I believe in you, love. Like, I care about you, and
Hmm.
you can do it. And it's like, yes, I'm gonna go for it. You know what I mean?
Well, it's funny because just yesterday I wanted to put out I want to do a little video, a reel, just talk, tell everybody who I am, right?
Sure,
And I don't know
sure.
if you saw it, but I probably did like literally 70 or 80 takes, and I kept messaging one of my best friends, Kevin Kowalczyk,
70?
dude,
That's a
because
lot of takes. That's a lot of takes.
bro, because if the
Yeah,
word was not right, or I stuttered, or I saw my eye flicker a certain
yeah,
way, I was just like,
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
didn't
Of
like
course, of
it.
course.
But maybe I'm exaggerating, said it, but it was a
Sure,
lot,
sure.
and so I sent him one, and I said, what do you think? And he goes, dude, it's awesome. It's great. And
Uh,
like, I was thinking,
yeah,
it's okay. It's pretty
yeah,
good. And then he says, it's awesome. And I'm like,
yeah,
you're right. It is awesome, right? So you're right. You need that. We need that little bit of motivation from within ourselves. But when we have that validation from someone that we care about, someone
sure,
that we trust, someone that um, we look up to at times. I mean, that can mean all the difference in the world. So talk about being a young head instructor, because I was 17 when I earned my black belt.
yeah,
I was 17 the very first time that I was asked to lead a class. The night that I earned my black belt, my instructor
yeah.
said, "Okay, the class is
Oh, that's
yours."
cool.
And,
That's
and I'm
cool.
like,
Yeah,
what do I do? Whatever
yeah,
you want is what he
yeah,
says, right?
yeah.
And so I'm looking across the room, and there's adults, there's professionals,
Yeah,
there's attorneys, doctors, people
yeah,
that like are more
yeah,
educated than me,
yeah.
and he's like,
They're adults.
but
They're men. Yeah,
you know more martial arts than they do. You
yeah,
you can help them, right? And
yeah.
so here I go. But it took a little while for me to really. I mean, I kind of faked it, I think, or I
Of
tried to
course.
play the part for
Yeah,
a bit. How was your experience as a young head instructor leading classes, opening a school and so forth?
yeah. So I'll go back to Jason picking me up from high school, 15, and driving to the martial arts school. So we jump into school, and I remember specifically my favorite things to do, like jump dive rolls, jump side kicks, like you know what I mean, the fun stuff that we did. That's
All the
what I
stuff the adults don't want to do.
Yeah, they don't, and it was so funny. It's so funny, and we would do it, and I would do it, and I remember one of the adult students was like, "Hey," he's like, he told him, he's like, "Hey, this stuff is like it's not like what I wanted to learn." He's like, "Ah, don't worry, we're just having fun." I do remember my first intro sales. This is actually really good for people who do sales. I remember he's like, I can't make it in today. You're gonna run to school today. He's like, you got a 3:30 intro. You got 4 o'clock. Yeah, all the way through the whole class, everything, the whole day. But you got this intro, and he goes, "This is all you have to tell them. After you teach them the single punch, like horse stance, single punch, upward block. I don't remember push kick. It was like three things, four things." And he goes, after that, just say it's $35 a week. You train you for $35 a week, 120 a month, and 140 a month, and that's it, right? So I have no concept. I have no idea of like there's takeaways. There's no like objections, anything. I'm just like, oh yeah, it's $35 a week. You know what I mean? And she's like, okay, sure. And I was like, it was $299 down. And that day, it was $299 down. Includes your
Hmm.
first month in uniform. And she's like, yeah, okay, cool, perfect. Writes me a check. I'm like, oh, cool. I had no idea that they would even say no or anything. I just told
Hmm.
her and just was 100% like, yeah, this is what it is. I was like, I got to go teach class. Are you in or you out? Like pretty much. And she's like, yeah, here's a check. And I was like, you want your kid to take the first class? Take it now. She's like, yes, put the uniform on him quick. Like ties the belt and everything. But it's just funny to think of how sometimes we just put all these negative objections and it's like you just assume the sale. I assumed it. Because I had no idea there would be any objections. I'm like,
Right.
here it is, here it is, here it is, here it is. This is what you do, and you like it? Yeah. Okay, good. Your kid could take the next
Hmm.
class. Actually, with me, I gotta go. It was
Right.
pretty funny. Yeah.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it can be it could be that simple, right?
Yeah.
Especially when your attitude projects that.
Yeah.
I'm sure that you taught, the punch and the block and the kick,
Sure.
but your attitude and your enthusiasm and your excitement and how you interact with them, that's what sells them. Like
100%.
I tell
100%.
my instructors all the time, I said, don't worry about selling them or any sales technique.
Yeah.
Like, show them what it is, have some
Yeah.
fun with them, because if
Yeah.
you're having fun, they're having fun. If
Yeah.
the parent sees the kid having fun, like, they're already there, they want to do it. That's the thing, is that when they come to your school, they want to sign up.
Yeah.
If they don't sign up, you probably screwed up.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's a good way to
but
say it. Yeah. Yeah.
right. So anyway, I think that that's but you're right. When you're young and you don't know, you just do it, and
Yeah.
okay, yes or no, simple, very
Yeah.
very simple. Hey,
Yeah.
quick shout out real quick, Dana Abbott. Good afternoon, sir. Thanks for jumping in and checking in on us. Let me know if you have any questions for Roland today. But again, thanks for hopping on today.
Dana's cool.
Anybody
Yeah.
else? Anybody else? Comment, say hello. What's up?
Yeah.
I
So
know
what's
there's a
up?
few people watching.
What's up?
So we're talking about your first teaching martial arts, your first sales. Now talk about um, you said when you were winning tournaments, it was really fun, and
Yeah.
that gave you the motivation. What happened when you were losing?
Yeah. So it's a funny story. I always tell the kids. I was like, no matter how many mistakes you make, you'll never make more mistakes than I make. And no matter how many losses you have, you can have more losses than I do. Because I always want them to feel like they're winning anyways. But I also want them to know that like you got to lose more than you win, right? And that's how you like kind of continue up the ladder of success.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of people, that's a hard thing. And success is always right around that corner of like losing, 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 winning. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Losing and winning. But competition was cool. I enjoyed competing. I enjoyed winning. I enjoyed not losing, of course, but it made me a better, made me practice and train harder and everything. But I do remember a significant moment at the Battle of Atlanta when I like zipped up my bag and I was like, I'm gonna go make champions. I'm not gonna concentrate on myself anymore. And it was a cool moment in my life. I'm sitting there and I'm taking my sparring gear off and I'm putting in my bag and I'm like, this is my last tournament. And it was my last tournament in a way of like in this moment of my life, I'm going to go back to the school and concentrate on growing the school and changing more people's lives. You know what I mean? Focus on that than myself. And that was cool. And for that, when I got to the school, I looked at the school differently. You know what I mean? You look at the school differently. You're trying to get your instructors to feel the same way you do about the school. You're like, we're changing the community around us. We're changing the kids' lives. And it takes a while for them to actually realize that. It takes one step. You could look at belt testing or graduation and they go through that and you look at them, and you're like, look what we're doing. And they're like, they get a taste of it. And they're like, yeah, that's cool. And then you do an event and they're like, ah, man, I changed their life again. And you're like, that's cool. And you do a camp and they're like, that's cool. But one day that someday, hopefully they snap and they really get your vision. I know you have the vision. There's a few of us that have that vision of changing the community and changing so many kids' lives
Mm-hmm.
and families' lives, right? You obviously have that vision, and how do we get that into them? So it's fun to see that and to go through that transition. But for me, competition was cool, but I also look at it in a way of like, yeah, that's about us getting better so that we can make more influence. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? If I can kick a board, I copied that the kick off of Street Fighter, right? It's Guile kick. I copied that. I've never seen it before. I copied. I hung the little square sentry target from the ceiling, and I tried to kick it, and I completely landed on my chest, and yeah, it was terrible. It was the worst. It was the worst. I was like, I could do it, and I like, bang! But I was like, I got halfway around. And I kept doing it, I kept trying it, and I got closer and closer until I eventually did it and raised a ton of money for a kid who had a terminally ill disease. One of my students, a little dragon, right? And it's like you look at that, like what forces you to have that motivation, that drive to change people's lives, and it's hard to give to somebody. You know what I mean? It's hard
Mm-hmm.
to relate that, but when people get it, they get it, and it's cool. They have a different perspective on life.
Well, so you talked about being at that tournament, packing up your gear, and
Yeah,
saying, I'm
yeah.
going to change
Yeah.
my perception
Yeah,
change."
that was a long-winded conversation. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. But what was it? What was it? Because a lot of us make that transition from being um, the performer, the athlete,
Yeah,
the competitor to it's not about me, it's about we,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
about creating a team
yeah,
and working on others, right? I mean, listen, I think we all, as martial artists, love the spotlight, love being the guy, the
yeah,
man, the
yeah,
person on the
yeah,
mat,
yeah,
with all that. But what changed for you? What was it that clicked for you that said,
yeah,
I want to focus on other people more than I want to focus on myself?
yeah. That's a good question. I think everybody has to find it out for themselves. But I would watch kids walk in as you start teaching from a junior standpoint, and they walk in with a trophy, right? And they
Hmm.
show you like, sir, I won this, and you're like, that just felt so much better. It's like how many trophies? Like I would give my trophies to every girlfriend I had. I was like, "Here, mom, take these trophies." My mom's like, "I can't handle any more trophies." My dad's like, "No more trophies in our." And like every girlfriend I had, I was like, "I won this for you." Like it was so bad, right? Such a bad thing. I'm like, "I won this for you," and they're like, "Yeah, I'm sure you did." And you get to a point where it's like, what am I doing this for, right?
Hmm.
And yourself is like, yeah, you can concentrate on yourself, but your journey in life has got to be more about who you're with, right? And who you go through that life with and who you share with. I always think about this. I was in Hong Kong once at the Four Seasons in the penthouse suite, right? I'm sitting there because when I did my show for Discovery Channel, they're like, "Here, this is your." I was doing interviews there, and I was sitting there, and I was all by myself, and I was looking at this beautiful view of Hong Kong. It was amazing. This room was like crazy. I mean, I'm sure you've stayed in nice hotels. This thing's bigger than my house. It's big. It's like I have all this, right? And I'm all by myself. What did I really have? Nothing.
Nothing.
Because you can't share it with somebody, you have nothing. If
That's
you're in a
right.
cave and you have billions of dollars around you in a cave, you have nothing to share it with. You have nothing, right? And I think that was a prophetic moment when I was just sitting there. And you know what? I turned on. I was trying to find a Laker game because it was like the Laker championships, and they were like it was like game 6 or game 7. I forget which one it was.
Hmm.
And I like turn it on. I'm watching by myself. I'm like cheering by myself. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. Time difference and everything. I'm watching the game, and I'm like, I'm sitting here in this. I have everything right now. If you think about it, as a human, you're on top of the world. Literally, I'm on top of the skyscraper. I'm looking at everything, and I'm sitting there by myself watching the Laker game by myself. And I was like, "Yeah, this is not cool. It's not fun." So you
Hmm.
gotta. It's about giving and doing it with people. You know what I mean? That makes
Yeah,
sense.
I 100% understand,
Yeah,
and I hope that people that are watching, or whether you're watching this live now, you're watching it later, like,
yeah,
really take a moment to think about that, because that's a pretty profound statement to
it is.
have everything and
Yeah,
really feel
yeah,
like you have nothing.
yeah.
You're lonely by yourself. And
Yeah,
now, as
and I
a
wasn't just to make it. I wasn't lonely. I wasn't like upset about anything. I was just realizing that I'm looking out this. I mean, this beautiful view of
Mhm,
everything, and I'm like, I have nobody to share it with. It
right.
wasn't. It wasn't like I was gonna, do anything dramatic. Like it just was me finding that moment where I was like, wow, I wish I could share this with somebody. I wish
Hmm.
I remember I had the second moment was Singapore. I had the same exact thing, the Four Seasons, because that's what Discovery Channel they have a uh, relationship with the Four Seasons.
Hmm.
So I'm on Orchard Row. If you're anybody's been to Singapore before, Orchard Row is like Beverly Hills. It's like the nicest place. And I literally same thing, penthouse suite. And I'm running through like risky business, running through and sliding on the feet, like woo! I'm like in this nice. I literally did that. I did it for fun of it right through like the living room in it. This is a living room in a hotel. Living room. There's offices. There's everything. There's like this giant spa inside. I have the best suite in the thing, and I was like, I'm all by myself. What am I doing? I'm running through here, like going through this, and that's when I really realized, like, if to be successful, yes, it's cool to earn things, but you got to share it with somebody, and that's where I actually wrote in my journal the story of the being on the mountain and being by yourself. I was like, if you're sitting, like you figure that like there's some guru is like in a mountain and is in a cave, right? You're sitting in a cave and you have billions of dollars, but you have nobody to share it with. You have nothing. That's when I wrote that. And for me,
Hmm.
that was a prophetic moment in life where I realized like I want to do it with people and I want to do it with a lot of people and I want to help a lot of people be successful. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At that point, it could have been a pinnacle for me, but it wasn't. It showed me that like you got to do this with somebody else.
And where was that in your life? I mean, how old were you at that point? How
I
long
was
had you been
30,
in the martial arts?
30.
30 years old.
Yeah, 30. Yeah.
Yeah. So you'd been teaching for 10 to 15 years,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah. I bought my
doing
school
your
in my
thing.
early 20s. It was great. I had a vision of like opening a school and buying a house, opening a school, buy a house. So I had two schools, two houses at 30 when I got picked up by Discovery Channel. Yeah.
Hmm. And that's when the shift That's when the shift happened. Now
Yeah.
you're a new dad as well, and I'm
Yeah.
sure that even more
Yes.
so now
Yes.
that changed because for me, I'll tell you, when people ask me what really changed for
Yeah.
you, what made you go from
Yeah.
this level to the next level or this phase to the next phase. I mean, for me, it was my kids. I had kids.
Yeah.
We had kids early, a little bit younger, and that's what I mean. It changed my school. It changed my program. It changed my outlook. It changed so much on how because we most of us come from kind of an old school background of martial arts, and you kind
Sure.
of got it's kind of rough, tough, get beat up. It wasn't real lovey dovey at all. It wasn't
Yeah.
real warm and fuzzy. Like if
Sure.
you got a compliment from your instructor, that was like something you held on for
Sure.
forever and ever.
Yeah.
Or at least that's how it was for me. But it just changed the entire culture of my school having my own children. And now as you're a new dad, I'm sure you'll see things even through different eyes, even more so.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for I mean, I built the school. I'm sitting in the school. It's pretty cool. I should take you for a tour. Um, I'm sitting in the school, and I think that for me, it was traveling and teaching and making an impact as far as I could. You know what I mean? Like, man, I've been to Antarctica, and I was like, where's a place I could teach? I've been in Africa. I've been on the dirt, like rolling with kids in Brazil in the dirt, and the kids like taking me down. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
double legging me. He's grabbing my legs. He's going hard. He's like trying to get me over, and I'm like, this kid's like 8 years old, just coming in on me like hard, like. And I saw the impact, and that's what I wanted to do. But now, like I think about it, for me, it's bringing it home to an area where I can like help this community. I've done school talks all over the world, but how can I help this community I live in? How can I
Hmm.
help the place where my kid's gonna to live? And like this is his school for me. It's like
Hmm.
living his legacy. So it's kind of fun. It's a different. It is a different mindset, and it's a different idea of like
Hmm.
what we're gonna do with this and how I'm gonna do that. Yeah, it's cool.
Now, anybody that knows you knows that you love to travel. When did you find that love to travel? When did that actually start? Because
Yeah.
I mean, you
Oh,
have been all over the
yeah.
world.
Yeah, yeah. 100%. I would tell you when I travel with Discovery Channel, I learned a different way of life. And this is kind of like I saw it because we had to go deep. We went into the military. So I trained with the military in a lot of countries, right? I got deep in the military. I've been in like the DMZ zone. I've like been with I've been with the head of defense for a couple countries, sat there, watched what they were doing. And when we did that, they always said, like, hey, we're going to go to the military, but we're also going to go to the markets so we can meet and get the food and meet the culture. Then we're going to find the music, right? And we're going to listen to the music, and we're going to see who makes music. And then we're going to go downtown, and we're going to just walk around. So I love traveling in general because we do events, like we do the Maya events, we do the UP events back in the day, like all these events, right? But when I got into the dirty, like the dirty of life, when you go into like the favelas, when you go into like South Africa, and you're like in the South Africa and the favelas and Tijuana, Juarez, those are the three most dangerous places in the world right now. They considered, and I went in deep in those, and I'm hanging out with kids, I'm hanging out with parents, we're training, but human people are human. We all have the same like characteristics, right? And I'm in there, and I'm like, man, this is what I want to see. This is what I want. This is what I want to learn about. So if I go to a country, let's just say it's Mexico, I want to hear the music, I want to taste the food, and I want to like meet the people. If I go to Russia, right? I went into Russia. The deepest, like, these guys looked at me and they're like, there's not an American. You're the first American who's ever been here before. And I was like, what do you mean?
Hmm.
He's like, there's no Americans ever come down this area ever. And I was like, okay. They're like the same thing. What food do we eat? What do we drink? What do we talk about? Like it's very, I don't know. It's very similar, but it's unique to their region. So that gave me like a cool. idea, taste for life that's a little bit different. It's like, who are you? What music do you listen to? What food do you listen to? What do you love to do? And
Hmm.
that for me is when you go to a place. So I go to Thailand sometimes, and I'll just bring my bag, I bring my backpack, and I'll just go in and I'll go to a fight school. I'll just walk in and be like, "When's the next class?" And they're like, "Oh, class is at 5 o'clock." They're like, "Do you have experience?" I'm like, "Ah, a little bit, you know." I walk in, go take a class. You know what I mean? I'll go to any country. I've been to so many, and I just want to like go for it. You know what I mean? I want to learn
Yeah.
the culture. The culture, I think, is what's cool. If you can learn that and enjoy it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. How did the Discovery Channel deal? I mean, how did you get that? How did you get involved? How did that
That's a
start?
fun story. It's a fun story. Um, so I talked earlier about a young kid that I had developed a brain tumor, right? Terminally ill disease. They gave him 2 months to live. Kid comes, the mom comes and says to me, "You can imagine this. You're an instructor and a dad." Oof. They're like, "We want to talk to you." I thought they wanted to cancel. They're like, "We want to talk to you. Can we talk to you in your office?" So I was like, "Okay, sure. Can we schedule an appointment?" Like, schedule an appointment. They sit down and they're like, "Kenny, his name. He's got 2 months to live." And they said we asked him, "What does he want?" Like, he has 2 months to live. Like,
Hmm.
how do you explain this to a kid that's 4.5, 5 years old? Yeah, 2 months. They said if you could do anything for the next 2 months before you go live with grandma and grandpa, that's what they said. That was their terminology. And he said, "I want to get my black belt." Can you imagine that? I want to get my
Wow.
black belt and I want to meet Mickey Mouse. And for me, it like broke my heart. And they're crying. They're like trying to tell me this, and I'm getting teared up. Like, and they're looking at me and they're like, "He wants to get his black belt." And we told him, like, "We'll try our best to get your black belt, you know, and you want to go meet Mickey Mouse." That's when I realized like what we say on the mat is so important. We always talk about like, "Oh, you want to get your black belt, you want to be this person." This kid literally, before he goes home to meet grandma and grandpa, he wants his black belt and go to Disneyland. So we did a breakathon, a kickathon, and we raised the money. $50,000 we raised, 47,000. And that's when I copied the kick from the guile kick from I was sitting, I was at the car wash, and I'm playing the video game, and I'm thinking to myself, what can I do? What can I do that would be amazing, right? So I go to the car wash. I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, what can I do? And I'm playing and I watch this. I'm playing Guile. I was my favorite character. And he does this flash kick. And I'm like, if I did that, can you imagine how much money I could raise? People would be freaked out. I've never seen this before. And that's when I went and hung the pad from the ceiling right when I got back to the school, and I missed and it landed on my stomach. But I got closer and closer and closer. Anyways, 2 months later, I did it. We raised money. Black Belt Magazine was inside Kung Fu. All these magazines were there to help raise money for this kid. And after that, they all decided they're like, "Hey, can we do an article on how you did this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I was doing jumps, plyometrics." Like, "Yes, teach us the plyometrics. I mean, teach us this." I have all these magazine interviews of this. And even they had Inside Kung Fu had like 3 or 4 magazines back in the day. They had like they had Paintball magazine. They had this, so they used the same article in all their magazines.
Hmm.
So this company from South America, no, South Asia, company's like, "Hey, we want to do a new TV show about this guy, traveling around with his old living masters and this and that." So they go to the newsstand and they get all the martial arts magazines. Just happened that month. I was in all of them.
Oh, wow.
So the guy calls and he's like, "Hey, we've seen you in all these magazines." He's like, "We're looking to do a host. We're looking for a host to do a TV show." And I was like, I'm not really interested. I was just running my school, because in California, a lot of people are doing like, they're trying to do like local shows. They're trying to do YouTube things. Like, it's a lot. So you just kind of let them go. He's like, "No, no, I really want to come out and like meet you." And I was like, "Yeah, cool." I was like, "I'm filming a video for Century." And I was like, "You can come watch if you want." And I was like, I was kind of rude, which was kind of funny. And he came and watched, and he's like, "Will you because he didn't tell me it was for Discovery Channel. He just said, we have an idea. We want to do this TV show, blah, blah, blah. So he comes and he sees me do the comma video for Century. And then he goes, will you come outside and like kind of do some stuff and talk about your weapons and this and that? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I'm like, all right, I'll give it a little bit, you know. And he's like, can you do some crazy jump kicks and flips? And I'm like, dude, you know how much work that is? Like, you don't ask somebody to just do this. And then I was like, I'll do a couple things. 2 weeks later, he's like, I'm putting a reel together. Just want to let you know this is for Discovery Channel. I'm like thinking to myself, I was like, I didn't even give half my effort that it could have. And he goes, but he's like, you're our favorite. And he's like, because he said, you said there's two things. He's like, one, you said why you teach martial arts is because you want to change the community. He said, two, he's like, there's no best style of martial arts. He's like, you said all styles are good. All styles are good. And you got to learn a little bit from each style and learn how to understand it. He's like, we interviewed a couple people already. I was like, oh, you interviewed other people. Like, I didn't know. And he's like, all of them said their style was the best. Like, they're the best guy. And they were egotistical. He's like, but you were like, you know, you're the best in that aspect. And then the third thing he said is like, he's like, what's your favorite food? And everybody was like, oh, I like rice and this. And I was like, I like Doritos and cheese. I like nacho cheese Doritos. He goes, you know what? He's like, we knew you would be fun. So he's like, we chose you. Like, it's a cool story. But it all comes back to one thing. You can't go backwards by paying forward. And so that story is about that kid and what he needed in his life and how I went forward and just did that and raised money for him and just happened to be in the magazine. But it's not just happened to be in the magazine because I did something good for the community. You know what I mean? And that always comes back. People always ask, like, you know, how do you become successful? I'm like, just keep doing the right thing over and over and over again. You climb that ladder of success and you're in a certain area. And that's what helps you become successful, right?
No, absolutely. I love that. I think that's great. And I hope that everybody watching right now, you guys are still tuned in. Again, if you have any questions, this is a great conversation that we're having. I think some really good nuggets and takeaways that you can use, because I think I agree with you so much about the giving back, because I will be honest in that when I was first a business owner, a school owner, it was always about um, like when I wanted to go out and promote the school, it's always about like, what can you do for me? What can you do for me? What can you do for me? How can I get in? How can I perform? How can I, me, right?
Yeah.
And it really changed. A lot of that changed, specifically due to my wife's heart for giving. And
Wow, that's cool. Yeah.
we're both in the Rotary Club now,
Yeah.
and that's just Rotary Club is all about giving back to the community. How
Right.
can I help?
Yeah.
And but my wife always had that, but I didn't understand it. I didn't understand it because I thought, I didn't think that there was emotion attached to business. I didn't think that there was any kind of any kind of emotion attached. I thought it was all
Yeah.
about transactions. It was always a transaction instead of
Mm,
looking at the result and looking at
mm,
how it makes people feel. And
yeah.
so I noticed that in our business, what really changed us the most is when the more we got involved and the more we gave of our time, the more we donated our services, went to schools, taught school
Yeah.
talks, sponsored the teams, um, raised money to help the food pantry, all these things. I'm looking around, I'm like, our business is more successful than ever, and
Cool.
we're not
Yeah.
asking for
Yeah.
anything, we're giving more.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah.
It was just such an amazing transformation for me as a person, due to my wife's influence. And now it's just kind of what defines us and who we are in our community. I joke sometimes that I do more volunteering and more work in the community than I do for my, if you want to call it
Dues.
a job. I don't
Yeah.
have a job. I've never had a
Yeah.
job. But you know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
just, it's crazy. So I love everything that you're saying about that, and how, how we can give more and do more and create that culture, not only in our school, but in our community overall. You created a community. Let's talk about creating the hyper martial arts
Sure.
system.
Sure. So, I'm in Brazil. That little kid I told you about, like trying to double leg me, and like of course I go down and I put him in guard, and I'm like, I'm wrestling with him, and he's like trying to go in between. He's like trying to do all these things, and I'm like, this
Mm-hmm.
he's got to be 10, and he's like, he's a beast. And I was like, this kid would crush any 10-year-old like in America, right? Like just the nature of his eyes and his everything. And I'm sitting with the instructor, and the instructor donates his time to these kids in the favelas, right? In the ghetto, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Favela is a ghetto. He donates his time, and he looks at me, and through the translation or translator, he says, "So this kid would be in prison right now if it wasn't for jujitsu." I was like, what does that mean? Because sometimes I want to ask further. I'm like, I don't want that. What does that mean? And he looks at me like kind of funny, and he goes, well, you know what that means? His brother is 4 years older than him. He's 14, 15 years old. He's already in prison. He's already shot, killed a couple people. And I was like, wow. He's like, if it wasn't for jujitsu, he didn't have something to do to work out, he would be in prison. This kid would be already be in prison. I guarantee it. And he looked at me weird and kind of gave me that like kind of straight answer, and I was like, wow. So I'm on the plane, and I'm thinking to myself, coming from Brazil to America to land in Los Angeles. And I'm just kind of writing my notes and kind of journaling a little bit and thinking, and I'm like, how do we make martial arts cool so every kid wants to do it, right? Because it changes what is, this. Everybody probably watching knows this. Martial arts changes people's lives. But how do we get more people into that? How do we get more people? How do we get all those kids? Because like they're going to look at martial arts. They don't want to do like the dorky ads or like some kids like this. They're not gonna join for that. Those kids are
Mm-hmm.
not gonna join. So I was like, how do we make martial arts cool so we can get more kids to join so we can change more people's lives? And so I was trying to think of a company that we could create where it supported the youth. It supported, like for me, I have this term in our company, youth is the truth, because youth is the next generation, right? How do we create the next generation of kids who are amazing, who have all the things that you instill in your martial arts school? How do they actually have that and develop that? And how do we do that? So that's how Hyper was conceived in a weird way. They say conceived, but that's how I was sitting there. I have my original notes, which is awesome, and I look at them sometimes, and it's cool to see that. Where it's like the name, even the name. When I was like, I hired a really cool company called Secret Penguin, and they're a branding company for youth branding company. Work with Christian Soy, a lot of skateboard companies, and this and that. And I was like, I want to make martial arts like cool. How do we
Mm-hmm.
make it like? How do you put like skateboarding, snowboarding, lifestyle sports, and how do you make martial arts like that? Right? How do you position that in that way?
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, "Whoa, that's kind of interesting." It's like it's like a nobody's ever done that. Like
Right.
it's just karate. It's just karate is karate, right? So we
Mm-hmm.
looked at it, and we looked at a bunch of names, and I was like, I don't want it to be a Japanese name. I just want it. And they're like, so they had like 4 or 5 different words, and we looked at it, and it was like one of the first ones was hyper, and I was like, we can't do hyper. It's interesting because why? This as a kid, like as a martial arts school owner, like every parent wants their kid not to be hyper. You know what I
Right.
mean? And I remember people telling me like that's a terrible name for a martial arts company, and I was like, that's cool. I appreciate that. But then I think, what is hyper? It means you're having fun and you have a lot of energy. So you just need to fuel it in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And when the kids come and they're training and they're hitting pads and they're standing up straight and they're like snapping their hands to their side, they're hyper focused on being the best they can be. And it's actually a much better name than any karate guy would come up with. You know what I mean? Because they're like, it should be called Zaiken Do. You know what I mean? They're like, it's not really like, it doesn't work in today's
What
time.
What were some of the other names? I'm just curious. What were some of the other names that were thrown around
They
that
were the
it could have
same.
been?
They were the same. There was like the way and like those things. You know what I mean?
Uh huh.
Any of those things.
Right.
But I remember I was sitting in my truck and I was like this. I was like, I said, hyper chucks. That sounds awesome. I want to learn hyper chucks. I was like, the hyper bow, hyper form. I'm like, dude, that all sounded awesome, right? And it's cool because once we did it, it was about a year and a half later that Nike came out with the hyper shorts. And they were like, the hyper shorts are like their most dynamic. They're like $90 shorts to come out with. And then it came out with hyper shoes and they came out with like other stuff. And it was like, hyper is just a word of making it much better. And
Hmm.
the reason we came up with the name, because when you kick, if you land on the same leg that you kick with, it's called a hyper kick. And so that's how we were kind of looking at different things. Like, what is the terms that kids are using today? They're like, oh, I do
Hmm.
a 540 is just a hyper tornado kick. You know what I mean? It's like I hypered this 720. That means you do a 720, but you land on the same leg you kicked with. Like, it's harder to do it. And then we're like, it's kind of cool. So it's a relevant term.
And so you built this whole brand and this whole culture, as we mentioned. How did you gather the team of students in martial art, the martial artists that you had that represented hyper in the early years?
Yeah.
And how do you, because one of the things that you're most well known for to this day now is building teams and helping schools to build better and stronger
Yeah.
teams.
You can see the poster. Like, this is our backdrop to our whole facility right here. Like, you can kind of see that, right?
Hmm.
Like, that's just the backdrop to like what like in our school. So for me, it was about going out and like finding people who are winning. And that was important because how could you say you have a curriculum from people that's a curriculum? Like, you have to have somebody that's like one, right? For me, at least, I was like, did you win this? So we have like the kickboxing curriculum that's from like John Hackelman and Chuck Liddell. They won. Glover, like all those people that they win. You know what I mean? We have Duke Rufus' curriculum. Like, he's there every weekend. We have um, a lot of the best fighters, a lot of best forms competitors. I wanted to build a curriculum that was based on like the winners, like the people who've actually gone on stage, have done it, and then use our philosophy. So each week we have like a quote from each one of those competitors who can say like, "Hey, this is how you win. This is what you do. This is the mindset that I have, and this is what got me to that level." You asked a question earlier, and you think about it. If you think about what's the guy's name? He said this. He said, if you can help 1,000 people, you can have anything you want, right? You can help 1,000 people, you can have anything you want. And that's how, when it goes back to having a school, like, you think about, how can I change 1,000 people's lives? I can have anything that I want. Like, you're successful. There's a plenty of people out there that are successful. But when you take that shift from me to we, as you said, or me to us, like, how do we make that shift? And when you make that shift, you think differently. When we think differently, that's when you grow, your business grows. Like, your wife taught you probably an important lesson, right? She's a beautiful person. She thinks about like, how can we change this community? How can we change the kids? We grew up just being rough. You're like, hey, step up. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, be tough. You know, like, no, no, no. Be caring. That's more important. Be tough is cool. We can make somebody tough, but be caring. You know what I mean?
And you can have both.
Yes, you can have both. You can have
You can
both.
have both.
Yeah.
So what's next for Roland Osborne?
So right now, like, we just opened a new school. We have a cool concept for martial arts schools, which is fun. We've built our curriculum, which is cool. And yeah, for us, it's about duplicating the process of changing the community. You know what I mean?
So
Um,
is your goal for yourself to open more schools or help license other schools
yeah, I
to
want to help
use?
license other schools. I think that for me, I can open a few more schools. That's easy, but if you want to make a bigger impact, it's about creating a curriculum that's easy, creating a sales system that's easy, creating like these backdrops. Like, can you create that backdrop? No, you can't. You personally cannot do that because you don't have the picture, you don't have the people, you don't have the team, you don't have that. And it's hard, right? It's hard. You know that. Like, you have an amazing school, you have what you have, but it's like, how do we give somebody an easier system to change more lives? And
Hmm.
so for me, I think that's the next step. The next 10 years will be helping the schools to, if they want, if they want to, use our curriculum, use the graphics that we made and the marketing systems that we made. That's cool. If not, that's awesome too. What I mean? I want every school to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, it's been an amazing,
Yeah,
almost
it's
hour
fun.
long
Thanks.
conversation.
Yeah.
I think everybody here watching, if you guys have maybe a minute just to throw a comment in the box, or if anything else, just share this. And I'm sure a lot of martial artists will take a lot from this, but also people, people that are watching that are not martial artists
Yeah.
heard us talk about a lot about mindset. You're talking about your traveling, your experiences, experiencing culture in
Sure.
other areas. Thanks for sharing the information about all the race car stuff. That was
Yeah.
cool. Learning about the
Yeah.
Discovery Channel. We talked about a lot today.
Yeah.
Really, really enjoyed it. So
I
thanks,
appreciate
thank you
that.
for your time.
No, thank you. And thanks for having me on. And thanks for listening to the story
I love it.
or the
I love
stories
hearing all the
or the
stories.
stories.
Story time is always the best time. It was
Yeah.
quite honestly, I tell this to a lot of guests that when I was coming up in the martial arts
Yeah.
and we would practice with our instructor. We had
Yeah.
a certain night a week. I think it was Wednesday nights for us for a really long time. We would meet up after all the classes were done, and my instructor would do all of his forms, 24 forms, and we would all do them
Wow.
together. But it wasn't doing the forms that I enjoyed. I mean, I enjoyed the forms. Don't get me wrong, but what I enjoyed more was listening to his stories, telling me stories of the old
Yeah.
days, telling me
Yeah.
because we learn so much through stories and experience, and
Yeah.
hearing stories from you explains a little bit more about your character. It explains a little
Sure.
bit about your
Sure.
motive. It explains a little bit about your vision, and I think that that's what makes this particular podcast unique and different. Is that when we get to hear everybody's different stories, we get to learn a little bit more about them, but it also helps teach a little bit about ourselves as well. So again, I appreciate that. Loved having you on the show. Loved
Thank
everything that
you.
you're
Appreciate
doing,
it.
and
Yeah.
let's keep connecting. And those of you that are watching, tune in again on Wednesday. We got another guest coming up this Wednesday, and every Monday and Wednesday looks like all the way through February at this point, and
Wow.
every Monday until October. If you want to be booked on this show, love to have you. Roland, we'll talk about a couple referrals from you as far as guests that you'd like to see on the show. But hang tight for about a minute. I'm going to close it out with our video, and just thank you everybody for watching today.
Thanks, guys.